Hi, so this is the help video for Unit 1P6. First of all, I want you to have a look at the layout of my document. I have the Unit 1P6 and my name in the header, so just double click in there to get it in. I'd like you all to make sure you do that. And then the full title for P6, which is taken from the unit content here. We are trying to describe how political, legal and social factors affect Tesco's, Crawshaw and their stakeholders. So you'll remember the term stakeholders from P2. Now, I've laid it out in a couple of ways. It's entirely up to you which way you do it. You can talk about Tesco's and their political, legal and social factors that affect their organisation, their business or their stakeholders. And then you can do Crawshaw and you can just use headings, or you could create yourself a little table. So you could do Tesco's political, describe the story, and then how will it affect Tesco's or its stakeholder. Either way, the key is you need to describe a political story and then explain how that will affect Tesco's or a stakeholder of Tesco's. I'm going to go through these stories pretty quickly. If you look in the description part of this YouTube video, there are all of the links in order on the YouTube description. So I want you to watch each story, then try and write the piece of work, the bit of work up. Take it step by step so that you don't miss anything out. You need to do all of the stories that I'm discussing here to be able to pass the task. The first one we'll just show you right now. So the first one is here, and the first one is a story about the budget 2013. So you can see over here that the date is 20th of March 2013, and it says corporation tax is to be cut to 20%. So this is the tax that Tesco's has to pay. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further, if we get into the nitty-gritty of the story, for you to be able to, let's just click back here, describe the story. I'm asking you to describe the story. So in order to be able to do that, you would first of all need to say that corporation tax is going to be, or as it turned out, it was cut to 20%. How did it happen? Well, in 2013 it went from 28% to 24%. In 2014 it went from 24% to 21%, and then in April 2015 it came down that last little percent, and now corporation tax is at 20%. What does this mean for Tesco's? So this is the sort of second half of the problem. How will it affect Tesco's? Well, there's a number of ways that it could affect Tesco's. If they have to pay the government less tax, which they do, they've got a couple of options of what they can do with that money. They could choose to reduce the costs within the store to try and make it so that more customers come in because the prices are lower. They could maybe give some of that money back to employees through higher wages. They could keep more profits and therefore pay their shareholders a bit more money. Or they could do a little bit of all three. So if we just think about how we're trying to fill this in. First of all, describe the story using the figures and the facts which are based within the story. Then pick either all of the parts that I've said there, or maybe just the one that you feel most comfortable with, or maybe you come up with a different idea about how it will affect Tesco's or one of their stakeholders, and then describe that in this box here, or do the same in this section underneath political, describe the story and then explain how it would affect Tesco's or a stakeholder. You need to do that for this story. Put the hyperlink in underneath it or in one of the boxes, possibly in here, so that somebody can trace the story back. But let's go on to the next story now. So the next story is here, okay, and it's another tax one. This one is value added tax, which was about its rise to 20%. So what I'd like you to do is have a read of the story. It gives you some indication as to the things that VAT goes on. But VAT is a tax that would help increase the cost of goods. So the things that Tesco sells start to go up. So with the link you can get to this BBC website, you could watch this little video. There's lots of stuff on the web about what VAT is. So describe what happened, when it happened, then explain how it would affect Tesco's and their customers. Okay. Next story. This next story is a legal story. So this is about a change in legislation, and this story is quite relevant and quite current because it's happened just this year, in the autumn this year, and it's about the increase in carrier bags. So again, use the figures which are in this link. So use the figures that are there to describe what the story is. Then explain, how does it affect Tesco's? How does it affect their customers? Next story, another legal story for Tesco's. So this is about minimum wage. You can see from this, minimum wage has been increasing steadily over the past few years, and it's got the latest rate from last month and how much they are. So how does, if you describe this story, which is what's happening to minimum wage, how does minimum wage affect Tesco's? That's the second part of the box, as it were. So in this first side, describe the story. So Tesco's legal. The story is about minimum wage going up. Explain using facts and figures. Then this side, how will it affect Tesco's? Explain what they have to do. Where does the money come from to pay their employees more money? What will that mean for customers? And that's again how you complete this side. So let's get to another story. I had a quick look today, and this is Tesco's World Food Department. Now, the World Food Department has got African groceries, American groceries, Asian, Cypriot, Greek, kosher, Mediterranean, Oriental, Polish, Turkish. A few years ago, this wouldn't have been the case in a Tesco supermarket. Now, part of this is because we've travelled, we've been on holiday to places like Turkey, but if you consider that particularly in more recent years, there has been more, with the widening of the European Union, there's been more Polish people who've been coming to the UK. Part of the need for Polish foods within the supermarkets is to encourage Polish customers to come into the store. So we're looking at social stories now. So what is the story? Okay, there's not many facts and figures here, but you need to describe how Tesco's is starting to sell more products. How does it affect Tesco's? How does it affect its customers? Ultimately, how does it affect the stores? So try and describe that, and that's the second part of the either the paragraph or of the box that you're filling out. Next one, which is how Tesco's is another social one, and this has got the market share. So how, as a percentage, how many customers who go to supermarkets shop at Tesco's and the other supermarkets. So you will see that from 2013 to 2014, Tesco's in 2013 had 30% of customers, all customers who went to supermarkets went to Tesco's, and that's now down to 28.9%. But if you'll see, down here, Aldi going up, Lidl going up. I've also found you the figures from a year later, so 2015, and you can see here that the figures for Tesco have gone down again, and the figures for Aldi have gone up further, and I think for Lidl they've also gone up a little bit as well. So in terms of social, using the figures, describe the story. So Tesco's social, describe the story. From these two articles, I am able to describe how Tesco's, the number of people wanting to shop at Tesco's is going down, the number of people shopping at Aldi and Lidl is going up. How would that affect Tesco's if they start having less customers? What does that mean for the store? Try and describe that in as much detail as you can. So now, let's start looking at the Crawshaw stories. So the first one is about funding. So we're back to the political stories again. So political decisions are being made and schools are receiving less money. This is quite a detailed story about how schools are getting less and less money. So pick out just some of the key points to explain how schools are getting less money this year. Then what will that mean for schools? What does that mean for you within the classroom? Where do you think that the school can start to cut costs? How would that affect you as a student and one of the stakeholders within the school? How do you think it will affect employees? Next story. So what's going on here? This is another political story. A-level reforms. So describe what's happening within the story. What happened this year to the A-level system? How did it change? Then you need to talk about, well, how does it affect Crawshaw or one of its stakeholders? So how has this affected maybe the teachers? What have they had to do differently? How has it affected the students who are maybe doing the new courses? And and then you've done your second political story for Crawshaw. So then we can have a look at one of the legal stories. So this legal story is about the changes in the education system for how old people need to be before they can leave school. In this case, it's talking about how this year it's up to 18. So describe the story, what is it, and then explain how it affects either a stakeholder, i.e. you guys, or how does it also affect the school. You can describe how it affects both of us. Students staying on till 18, what does that mean to the numbers in sixth form? What does that mean to our classroom sizes? What does it mean to the number of students who are currently in your class compared to the number of students who were there last year? Next story. So this is a social story. So within the UK, there are more and more students who are coming to the UK and coming to schools within the UK who don't have English as a first language. And so EAL stands for English as an additional language. So students for whom English isn't their first language. And it says in the byline here that the number of students speaking foreign languages at home has risen by 20%. So what does that mean for schools? So once you've described the story, you've picked some key facts and figures out to describe the story, then explain how would it affect schools. Now for Crawshaw, obviously this doesn't tell us exactly what's happening within Crawshaw, it's just picking some data about schools generally, but how does the number of people who don't speak English as a first language affecting what we might have to do at Crawshaw? Okay, next one. So it's about class sizes. Now this was a study that's been done, and it shows how primary class sizes in the UK are some of the highest in the world when compared to a lot of other countries over here. So using that information, if you can see also, it's quite different in terms of primary and secondary. So primary in red and lower secondary in blue, and we're quite low when it comes to secondary school, but with primary school we're quite high. Now for Crawshaw, we're not a primary school, so the high numbers of students within primary school, or in terms of classroom sizes, isn't that much of an issue for us at the moment. But it might suggest that there are lots and lots of students in primary schools and that will soon be coming to the secondary school. So how will that affect us then? What will happen to our classroom sizes, particularly in the light of the fact that the funding for schools is going down, so we aren't going to be able to take on more teachers. So what will happen to classroom sizes here at Crawshaw? So again, just thinking back to our model, Crawshaw, social, describe the story about classroom sizes across the world, and then how will it affect us here at Crawshaw, or students like yourselves at Crawshaw. Once you've done that story, then there are no more. So just a quick recap. After you've done each story, just make sure, after you've listened to the little things that I've got to say about each story, read it, take out the key figures to describe what the story is telling you, and then in the other side explain how that political, legal or social issue would affect Crawshaw. Any problems, give me a shout.